All right. Well, welcome. We will have the opportunity to do some Q&A towards the end of the webinar today. So when you're speaking, please identify yourself and speak clearly. You may be asked to repeat your comments or questions if there's a delay or issue with the audio. So don't be offended if we ask you to repeat yourself. Finally, we just ask you can use the chat feature throughout the webinar today. So if a question bubbles up while we're covering a specific topic, go ahead and insert that question right into the chat, and that way we can address it as we go. The purpose of the webinar today is we are going to spend some time talking about the District ARP ESSER plan that is due on August 24th, 2021. So we'll be going over just useful information for you as well as the requirements of the plan. We're going to spend some time going over some helpful tips for navigating and completing the plan template. And then finally, we will spend some time outlining the alignment between your District ARP ESSER plan and the ESSER 3 e-grants application, your plan budget. So that is what we will plan to cover today. Who is with you today from OPI is myself. My name is Jeff Kirksey. I'm the ESSER program manager here at OPI, and I work exclusively with the ESSER program. And can answer any of your questions ranging from allowable use to navigating the plan, as well as any budget sort of questions you might have related to your ESSER dollars. And then my colleague Julie Mergel is also with us this morning. Julie, do you have sound yet? Not yet. Okay. So Julie Mergel is our senior manager for school improvement and innovation. And if we can get her mic working, you might hear from her at some point. Otherwise, you're stuck with me. So, all right. All right. Well, so let's go over first requirements and details of the LEA ARP ESSER plan. So as you know, the District ARP ESSER plan template opened on July 1st and it closes on August 24th, and that is in Teams. OPI will continue to release information on the OPI website under the ESSER information page so that you can begin work in the application and opening of the opening of the template in Teams. So we did just realize we did go through a website migration, and we lost a few things in the translation. So we are going back and putting some resources back up. One of the things that we noticed we lost was the PDF template that we had put up of the District ARP ESSER plan, and so we will get that available. If you need it before we get it up on the website, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll give you my email here in the chat, and then it's also at the end of the presentation today. But I'm happy to send that off over to you. Also, I can send over a Word version of that if you prefer working with a Word document. That template can be kind of a working document for you before you're ready to enter it into Teams. All right, so the requirements of the school district plan include a minimum of how districts will, 1, use funds to implement prevention and mitigation strategies for COVID-19, use the funding totaling no less than 20% to address lost instructional time, spend its remaining 80% of our ESSER funds, and respond to the needs of students disproportionately affected by the pandemic, and meaningful engagement with and consultation with stakeholders in crafting their plans. Each of these federally required components are embedded into the school district ARP ESSER plan template. In addition to the U.S. Department of Education requires that OPI to support the monitoring of each school district's use of ARP ESSER funds By the implementation of evidence-based interventions, address the student groups specifically that were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, and identify, re-engage, and support students who have experienced the impact of lost instructional time. The plan will provide the information necessary for the OPI to support and monitor school districts as we all move forward. A couple elements of related to state components throughout this plan, the school district, throughout the school district's ARP ESSER plan, the OPI has emphasized local control and coordination of state initiatives and requirements so that school districts can identify and innovate solutions that are unique to local needs and priorities. These components are embedded in the school district ARP ESSER plan template. So additionally, on July 15th, 2021, the OPI sought and was approved flexibility from the Board of Public Education to use the goals section of this plan, your district ARP ESSER plan, in place of the continuous school improvement plan, also known as CSIP. So hopefully that's good news for you. So we want to go over today some helpful tips for navigating and completing the LEA ARP ESSER plan template. First of all, if you have not accessed the template, we encourage you to do that in Teams. You will find the Teams login page at the website listed here off of OPI. It's actually under School Accreditation, and then you will see the Teams button, and you can either log in, and if you and will be prompted to log in Teams. If you do not have a Teams account, you will go to the Teams help page, and under and then there on the help page, you will see a couple different items available to you, but under OPI Teams resources, you will see in your drop-down menu, add or change user accounts with Teams security form. Click on that form, submit that form, and we will work to get you set up so that you can enter your ARP ESSER plan in Teams. So once you're in Teams, you will see right at the top of the page, will say ARP ESSER LEA plan, and you will click here to complete the plan. So, all right. Now we're realizing we're running into a number of scenarios.
Jeff, can you hear me now, Jeff?
Oh, I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, I can get this part if you want.
Sure.
You can go back on the egress. So sorry, you guys. I presented yesterday at SAM, and the technicians were messed with my computer to put my screen up, and so I was trying to undo the magic. So thank you. So we have come up with a couple of district scenarios when you do go to submit your ARP ESSER plan, and just want to talk through that because we had to put this particular plan into what we call the Qualtrics platform, which is actually a survey platform. And so because of that, being that it's a survey platform that's living in Teams where the link is, a survey only allows one person to submit a plan. And so so there's some unique things around having one submission. And so we want to talk through some of those scenarios just to be sure that you're able then to understand which submissions need to be inputted for each district. So here's a couple of different scenarios. So just want to reiterate, if you have multiple schools in a district and previously completed a CSIP in the prior years, the Continuous School Improvement Plan for the district and each school, do you need to complete an LE ARP ESSER plan for each school? And the answer is no. You are only required to submit an LEA ARP ESSER plan for the district. So as you guys know, we are using this in place of the CSIP. Second scenario, if you have separate school districts, but one fiscal agent, do you need to complete an LEA ARP ESSER plan for each district? The answer to that is no. If you have one fiscal agent and one E-grant application for ESSER 3, then you only need one LEA ARP ESSER plan that incorporates all of the districts. This would be similar to how you receive and distribute your Title I funding under the E-grant consolidated application. So again, if you have just one E-grant application that you're completing, then you will complete one LEA ARP ESSER district plan. Next scenario, if you're a county superintendent and have multiple school districts, do you need to complete an LEA ARP ESSER plan for each district? Yes, you will need to complete an LEA ARP ESSER plan for each district because each district has a separate E-grant application and fiscal agent. And we've got to be sure that our plan is really connected and correlates with the budget that's in the E-grant application under ESSER 3. And so in order to alleviate the single user submission that's tied to one IP address, we strongly suggest you have supervising teachers of each district in your county complete the plan and submit from their own IP address. That way, you're not going to run into a situation where when you pull up to do a different district, it's going to say you already submitted your plan. And so that's how we're kind of working around that. Next scenario, Jeff. We also do have a situation where if you have a separate district and fiscal agent for your K-8 elementary and your 9-12 secondary districts, the question is, do you need to complete a separate LEA ARP ESSER plan for both the elementary and the secondary? The answer to that would be yes. You will need to complete an LEA ARP ESSER plan for both the elementary and secondary district because each district has a separate E-grant application and fiscal agent. In this situation, to alleviate, again, that single user submission tied to one IP address, we strongly suggest you and/or a school leader of one of the two districts complete the plan and submit from their own IP address. So we hope that you really kind of see here, if you have an E-grants application and a fiscal agent, that equals a district plan. If you have two E-grant applications and two fiscal agents, that means two district ARP ESSER plans. If you are a county superintendent and have 6 E-grant applications, you will have, even though you may be the same fiscal agent, 6 E-grant applications, and you're going to need 6 different ARP ESSER district plans. Hope that helps. Next slide, Jeff. So I did kind of I was thinking about putting some pictures of Donkey Kong up here, you know, being sure we don't fall off down to the alligators. But to avoid the pitfalls with some of the technology here, I do want to kind of share with you that you really want to use the same computer that has the same IP address to complete the template, because the response is tied to that unique IP address rather than an email or an individual school link. So there's a potential, if you're doing it on a desktop at the office and you leave and don't finish it and then try to open it up again in your laptop that's not connected to your desktop, it may not appear there. It's not gone, it's just that the submission of this is tied to that IP address. Even if you try to clean the cache and try to do that again, that's not going to help you. So just kind of want to talk about that a little bit so you can be sure that you're kind of avoiding this ahead of time. We do recommend, if you're trying to do some collaboration around it and want to have multiple contributions to the plan, to download and save the PDF version as a Word document, and then you can share that around for people to kind of be putting comments on, editing, doing the track changes in the Word document. And then when it's finalized, take that final document and use that as the master document to then upload into the submission link. I would identify a single submission author, preferably the district or school leader responsible for the implementation of the plan, knowing that every 6 months this is going to need to be at a minimum updated and reviewed. Because of some of the things that are in there, we want to be sure that the programming is tightly tied to the funding of what the dollars are being used for. So we highly recommend that the person submitting it is the person who is leading the charge of actually implementing it, because we will be looking at these plans, and if we have questions, we have to be monitoring it. We want to know who we should be contacting is probably the person that has the most information of the plan. We really seize the opportunity to leverage this plan to drive school improvements and enhance stakeholder engagement. We're really encouraging you to, take this compliancy activity and leverage it to really drive the changes that you want to see and innovate, and to really take advantage of the opportunity maybe to do things that you have not been able to do previously. So just want to really encourage you to take that opportunity to do that, and pull folks together to have multiple voices in the conversation with the plan. And then we would say we want to just be sure that you're submitting only one final template. We don't want to have 5 different versions of the template and then have to go back and figure out which is the real one that we should be actually referring to and taking a look at. So Jeff, before we kind of move on to pre-planning, I did just want to pause there because that's a lot of information about just kind of the technicalities of the system in and of itself. Any questions? Okay, next slide. So before you even begin, these are the critical pieces of part of the ARP ESSER plan that you want to begin now. And that is to really take some time to identify what your top needs are. What we found at the state level when we reached out for the state plan is that there was a pretty strong emphasis and need that was identified across our state in all kinds of different school settings, from Class A to Class C, where we had mental health was a #1 priority identified, to social and emotional, to academic. And so that's really based upon those is going to be important then to be able to say, okay, if that's the needs, how do I address those needs that you don't have a lot of different priorities? We have been hearing a little bit about what kind of data do we use to really identify those gaps, particularly since you have to identify gaps for student subgroups. And so we want to encourage you to think about using more than just academic data like interim data or summative assessment data, but to be thinking of things like attendance data, graduation data, engagement data, how many kids are engaged in enrichment activities, data around your professional development that you're offering, recruitment and retention data at your school. So we really want to encourage you to think through kind of what that is, and that you really reach out to your stakeholders also and asking them what their needs are. So I would say that that's another piece that we've talked a lot about and have really spoken with our communities, because they're saying this is a really tough time. That this is due on August 24th. It opened on July 1. We're in the middle of summer. We're not in contact with our people. How do we really do that stakeholder engagement in a way that is inviting them? And so the point is, you have to really invite all of the different members of that stakeholder groups that are required, from parents to students to teachers to staff to community members, tribal council members if that is relevant to you, school board, folks that represent homeless. There's a required list. And so the point is that you invite them for their input, not that each of these subgroups give input. So you could do bulletins out, email blast that say, we're just seeking your input. Provide some email what you think the needs are. You could do a survey. We would encourage you to do a short survey that could be completed in 5 to 10 minutes with closed questions to just help get that return rate back. And it could just be simply, what do you think we should be spending this money on? Which of the student groups do you feel were most impacted? How would you like us to use the 20% set aside to address academic lost time? And then what would you like to see the other 80% used for? You could also advertise out a 1-hour kind of Zoom meeting like we're doing right now to just say, come, we want to have an open discussion with our stakeholders around what you feel the needs are. You could do a similar thing at a board meeting, post that the board meeting and meet with the board chair and say, we'd like to have, public comment on ARP ESSER. And so we would love for to invite anyone from the community stakeholder groups to come to the board meeting and discuss what they feel the needs are. Then that way you've got the agenda, you've also got the minute meetings from that. So those are some of the ways we're trying to encourage. We're going to put up some sample bulletins that you could kind of take a look at. And we're also going to put up on our webpage maybe some sample questions that you could use for a survey that would be quick to put into Google so that you could get it out to your stakeholders. We realize that's a piece that, we want you to do it in a fashion that you have already been doing stakeholder input, because that would be the way that people are most used to it. So I don't know how you send out bulletins, put things on your webpage to get information out to families and communities and staff. So those pieces are the ones that it would be helpful to have that stuff before you even begin, kind of going in and completing the answers to the questions in the template, because the questions in the template are going to kind of refer to some of these things. Next slide, Jeff. A couple of other tidbits, if you will, helpful things about completing your plan is that when you get in there and you reach a stopping point and you're like, I need to stop now, I need to come back to this later, I want to go find some more information, I'm thinking about this. Be sure that you click next, because as soon as you hit next to go to the next screen in there, it'll save your work for when you come back. And you want to be sure that you do not hit submit until you are ready for it to come to the OPI. So that's when you're all complete and done, because once you hit submit, then those responses are saved and recorded and you can't reopen the link. If that happens though, please reach out to us here at the OPI. Reach out to us at opiteams@mt.gov if you have some kind of issue that does happen, and we will get your link and get that stuff back to you. But to avoid all of that, please do not hit submit. You can hit next, back and next and back and next as many times as you want, but don't hit submit till the very end. And then when you do, you have a button that will appear to say that you can download into PDF file the responses from the survey. So you are going to need to download that PDF file and then upload that to your web page. That's one of the requirements of the federal requirements for ARP ESSER. And then that will come to us, and you should receive back from the OPI within about 72 hours. We're monitoring that. We will send you an email that says we have received your submission, so that we have actually gotten it and it didn't go to some black hole. So we can respond that back to you. Please know that we'll be reviewing those responses and reaching back out to you if there's anything in there that we had questions around or need to talk to you about. We have set up this template though. If there's some kind of required response, the tool is going to make you go back and fill that in before you can move to the next screen. The places in the plan where it is not required, where it's optional information, it's been set not to require you to do that before you go to next. So that'll help us be sure that you've responded to each of the required sections that are in here. So we hope to, kind of put together a team to kind of take a look at and be sure that your plan is in alignment with your budget that's in e-grants. And so anticipate that if there's anything that comes up, we'll reach back out to you about that. But we did want you to know we'll be sending out emails. We have 5 school districts who have already completed the ARP ESSER plan, and we had, as of yesterday, 60 that are in progress. So we'll be reaching out, that last week to be sure that if someone's like 90% there, that they know that they're not quite have submitted that button. So we'll try to really support you guys to get everybody across that finish line on August 24th. Next slide, Jeff. So I think that also when you're thinking about this plan and you're kind of going through, really be thinking about what you want to achieve by September of 2024. What are those goals? Because the goals that you identify in CSIP on an annual basis for ELA, math, and other are now living in here so that this can be used in place of your CSIP. And then I just would say that you're going to want to understand that there's 2 separate deadlines that need to kind of come, and they're not living together. This is due the 24th, and then your e-grant for ESSER 3 is due on September 1st. Also, your e-grant ESSER 2 is also due on September 1st. Okay, next slide. We do want you to know we'll have, Jeff had mentioned we had some difficulty with the migration of our recent webpage, but we lost a few documents in the process, but we're going to go back in tomorrow and be sure everything is back up. In the meantime, these were resources that we had on there that disappeared. We'll get them back up as soon as possible. And so we've tried to find some resources that we think would be helpful for you. There's a gap analysis tool that a team here at the OPI did from School Improvement. There's pieces on, what are evidence-based practices. There's information on accelerating learning, which was an important piece for that 20% to be thinking about. How do you address that lost instructional time? There's some really good guidance on there. We have some information about social emotional learning priorities. That's an important piece as well, because we're seeing that as a need for many of our school districts that they're asking for some information on that. Next slide, Jeff. So next steps, like I said, we'll confirm your submission via email to the email that is logged in and identified at the start of the template. And then we are going to take this, since it's living in this survey tool, and we're going to migrate it over into what was formerly the CSIP tool. And as soon as we have it closed on the 24th and have everyone's answers, it's going to go over to that tool to live, because it's much more nimble, and then you can go in at any time and adjust and make changes and be sure that you are reviewing it at that minimum point of every 6 months up through September of 2023. We will also, you'll notice in the template, we are collecting information from our school districts of a bank of strategies that they're using, because we want to be able to share that out to say, here's some schools that might be similar to yours, and these are the things that they're doing and practices that they're sharing that they're finding success. So we'll be able to start to share those out as soon as we get them in August, and then every 6 months keep coming back to say, these are the ones that school districts are sharing and saying that they're finding are making a difference. We talked about that. Next slide, I think, is going to be you, Jeff. It's all back to you, Mr. Kirksky. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. And just because I see your question there in the chat there, Sarah, all of these webinars, 1 and 2, the ones we did previously, are currently on the website. They're on the OPI ESSER website. They are listed under the guidance tab, and you can scroll down and find them there. This webinar will also live there either today or tomorrow morning. It usually about 24 hours turnaround on getting that posted. So, oh, I am just okay. So let's talk about alignment between the ARP ESSER plan and your eGrants application. This is just kind of a review. These are the 8 sections within your plan, but you'll want to make sure then as you go through and think about your budget and funding plan, that your budget is actually, you are funding your goals, you are coordinating your funding, that you have a budget plan in place to actually help you achieve all of the priorities and goals that are outlined in the template. So when you actually get into eGrants and are ready to enter your budget, there are 3 budget allocations represented in the ESSER 3 consolidated eGrants application. And you'll remember from, this was also the case in ESSER 2, there were multiple allocations that might have been in your plan. So first is the ESSER 3 base plan. That's the 80% that Julie mentioned earlier of your federal allocation. Some of you will see school district supplemental. And what we've done in those cases, particularly for schools that do not participate in Title I, the state has actually gone through and given an additional allocation just to make sure that every district across the state is getting some aid through ESSER dollars. So, but it's not just Title I is just one of the things. You might notice that you have both ESSER base and school district supplemental. And then the last piece is lost instructional time. So, and this is a minimum of 20% of your federal allocation has to be set aside for learning lost instructional time. As I've talked to superintendents and clerks and educators around the state, they've struggled with this a little bit because many of our schools across the state did not actually lose instructional time. So, but that doesn't mean that their students weren't adversely impacted, and their educators for that matter, adversely impacted by the pandemic. And so there is some things that we can leverage these dollars for to really help improve learning for our students. And so I think that's where it's really helpful when Julie mentioned earlier resources about accelerated learning or learning acceleration. This is a good category to do this. And just a reminder, we are waiting for our final approval from the Department of Education for our full funding. Right now, if you go into eGrants, and I've had many a concerned superintendent or clerk call me and say, Jeff, we are missing a huge portion of our anticipated funding. And I said, is it about a third? And they're like, yes. I'm like, yep, it's because we haven't received it yet. So once the state plan is approved and the federal government releases that final third, then you'll see your full allocation in eGrants. Right now, we can only allocate that which we have received. And so, so you have 2/3 sitting there now. So, and if that happens after you've already submitted your eGrants application, that's no big deal. We can fix that through budget amendment processes. So let me see, I'm just seeing a question coming in. Can we utilize ESSER 3 lost instructional time funds to supplement our title teacher salaries due to the increase in students who have additional help due to learning loss? Yeah, I think that would be one strategy you could do. You could also, school districts across the state, some are adding aides to help in those situations, or adding additional specialists. So. All right, and this is for the clerks in the room and business managers, superintendents you can pay attention to. When you're actually entering your budgets into e-grants, though you will be you'll use the same set of object codes for all three of those previously mentioned buckets. So the ESSER base, the lost instructional time, and if you have it, the school district supplemental. One thing I do want you to be mindful of is if you are doing an improvement to a building that is over $25,000, please do not code that as a 400 purchase property service. If it's over $25,000, it is no longer considered minor construction. It is a major project, and that needs to be capitalized under 700 property. So, and then I will remind you, if you are purchasing a piece of equipment, that the piece of equipment itself is over $5,000, or if you are doing renovations to your property that are over $25,000, you do need to get pre-approval from OPI to move forward on those projects. Really what we're looking at is just to ensure that the project that you're doing is an allowable use and that the grant will cover it, because we don't want you to find yourself in a situation where you spent money on a project that actually isn't covered and you were planning on the grant covering it, but it isn't allowable use. Then you're going to be left holding the bag. And so that's why there is the pre-approval process. It's not just another hoop we want you to jump through. It's actually the federal government's way of ensuring that we've done that. So there's two different ways you can access the pre-approval form. One, there is an access link here directly that when you have access to the slides, you can click on the link and go directly to the form, or in your e-grants application under property and the property and equipment tab in your budget selections, there is a link for the tab there for the form there as well. That form comes to me. I am reviewing these kind of in tandem. So I'll review your e-grant application and your capital pre-approval form at the same time. And if there are any problems with your capital pre-improvement form, we will reach out to you. We're in the process of doing a review of those, and we will have formal communication out about your approval status before hopefully we're shooting for the end of this week. We'll see how we do there. If you have a project that you are really needing to get started and you want to know the status, please reach out to me directly, and I can let you know. So, all right.
Jeff, there's a question in the chat box in reference to this. So Serena has asked if you've already received an email approval for the capital expenditure, do you still need to fill out this form?
That's a great question, Serena, because this is a newer requirement. So if you received an email approval from Ken Bailey, our former CEO, who's retired, but if you received an email approval from Ken Bailey, that does meet the approval requirement. It would be helpful if you go ahead and complete the form as well. though it won't need to be approved again. We're just trying to keep a consistent way of tracking all the approval requests that we're getting. And that helps us so that when the federal government asks us what schools are spending your funds on, we don't have to come back and ask you again. So if you can go ahead and enter that, that would be really helpful. But you won't need to wait for approval if you've already received approval. And I have sent out a few email approvals as well too, particularly for schools that are, they really are waiting to start a project for that final approval. We don't want to delay your construction processes, so particularly if it meets approval. So feel free to reach out. All right, and then I just wanted to give a little bit, just some examples of the sort of language we're needing to see in e-grants to help just make that connection back to COVID prevention, preparation, or response. So you will do that. You'll likely do that throughout your district ARP ESSER plan. But when it comes to actually requesting the funds, it's really helpful to make that strong connection in your budget description. So I provided a few examples here. Those of you who have received return grants from me, I've started including this language in the comments too, so you don't have to, so you don't struggle so much to make those connections. So say you're adding some new staff, and so let's say you're adding a new aide, and so you could put aide salary to hire specialist, or in this case it would be a specialist that you're hiring. So let's say special ed salary to hire specialists to help support students whose learning was adversely impacted by the pandemic in order to help students reach grade level expectations. So it doesn't need to be long, but it should be succinct, and it does need to tie back to the pandemic, because that is the first hurdle all of these funds have to clear in justifying allowable use. Another example, so maybe you're purchasing some new technology, so you could be purchasing a server to enable the district to easily transition to online learning as part of our COVID preparation strategy. So just wanted to give you a few different examples, but every one of your budget lines, you should be able to make that connection to COVID preparation, prevention, or response. If you're struggling with that, certainly give me a call, shoot me an email, we can talk about that. If you're struggling too much, it might not actually connect. So then we need to talk on that front too. So there are a lot of resources available on our website, and we're actually in the process. We have been growing with this right along as we've been getting more information. And so we are going to be continually kind of retooling our website to make sure that all the information is there in a easy to find and easy to use fashion. So we may even be reformatting a little bit of how it's laid out. If we do that, we're going to try to make it really obvious. One thing we're talking about even right now is when you go under guidance, you actually see all the guidance and resources and recommendation that we've ever put out available related to ESSER 1, 2, and 3. We will probably work on categorizing those so it's easier to find what you're looking for versus having to scroll through the whole list. But and we're continually adding that. Julie in particular is really good at finding new resources.
So Jeff, I just wanted to go back one slide if you don't mind.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to kind of give some examples there. So the correlation then between the budget and the plan. So these examples that Jeff is sharing here are definitely ones that would fall under that 20% set aside. So when you're hiring a staff member and you're identifying that salary under those codes, it is going to show up in your budget. Jeff, back one
Yep.
page to the codes. One more. It's going to come under 100 and 200, right? Because maybe somebody had an example in question in there. They're using money to help pay for the interventionist. So they're going to end up having some salary and then benefits. So it'll be both codes 100 and 200. And this is going to be part of that, as Jeff is saying, that 20% set aside. What that means then, that's going to show up in your ARP ESSER plan under section 6, under addressing lost instructional time, where you might be checking, for example, accelerating learning through instructional approaches. In school acceleration, certified educators will provide that support. So there should be some kind of correlation between the two. Also, for example, if you are doing some capital, major construction to address, for example, air quality, because that is part of preventing COVID, and you need to improve the air quality in your school. And so you're, putting in air conditioning units or maybe new windows, I don't know, something that's helping with the ventilation, whatever that might be, and it does get approved and it's under a 700 code, then that's going to show up in your ARP ESSER plan under section 5, creating safe and healthy learning environments, where you'll probably be checking school facility repairs and improvements to enable operation of schools to reduce risk of virus transmission and exposure to environmental health hazards and to support students. So that we just want to be sure that that's what you're thinking about in terms of how do these align. And so it's going to be really particularly around how did you use the 20% set aside? How did you use the remaining 80%? And then how did you address any student groups that may have been impacted more than others? So that's also in Jeff, that next slide there. In those statements, I think it's going to be important in your e-grants to say how it says here, for example, a specialist to help support students whose learning was adversely impacted by the pandemic. There may be a certain student group that you are addressing. Maybe it was your second language learners, or maybe it was students with special needs. So I just want to kind of point some of those examples out of how you will see these things kind of start to come together between the plan and the budget. Questions about that?
Bill, I did answer your question there in the chat too, but I noticed that last evening when I was navigating the website to the coding document that's under the coding link or the coding tab. That link appears to have been broken in the website transition too. So we'll fix that and get that up and running too. So it's on my list.
Jeff, did you see what Rachel had put in there?
Yeah.
Rachel, did you want to say anything about what 0 to 5 is offering folks at the event on the webinar? Okay, any questions? Please check out our website towards the end of the week. We hope to be having some, tools up there back on, like a PDF copy of our ARP ESSER plan, and the codes obviously need to, budget codes need to be put back up. And we'll also be putting up recordings and slideshows of these sessions for our LEA ARP sessions, the last 3 Tuesdays, including this one. And we'll also be putting up some sample bulletins that you can use for stakeholder input or some surveys. And we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. Please feel free to, email Jeff, and we will be back in touch with you all as needed.
Yes, and I am just right now entering my phone number as well as my email address in the chat. And so making that available to you. Feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call anytime. I am typically in 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. If I am away from my desk, or if I'm working remotely, I will let you know that on my voicemail. And so in that situation, probably email is the best way to get a hold of me. But we're here to answer your questions. If you have any questions related to ARP ESSER and you don't know who to go to, always feel free to start with me. I can serve as OPI ESSER triage for you and get you connected to the right resource person. And chances are, like, had a great question yesterday from Linda, the county superintendent for Beaverhead, and with some questions about submitting plans for multiple districts, and that was really helpful to know that, because though Linda raised the question, that will apply to lots of folks across the state. And so don't feel like that your question is always isolated just to you. A lot of times the questions you have really help us think strategically about the state and what the needs might be across the state. And so don't be afraid to call. I try to be a nice guy for the most part. So feel free to call or shoot me an email. And we're finding that we're able to turn around a response usually same day. But if we need a little more time, we'll let you know. So. Okay. Any questions to conclude with? All right. Okay. Well, feel free to share the webinar information to anybody that you think it would be helpful to, and we would be happy to help out any of our colleagues across the state. So. All right. Okay. I'll stop recording.